Welcome back to the Old Photo Vault channel. The Vigil Photograph. Hartford, Connecticut. Winter, 1919. They arranged Aunt Eleanor in the parlor because the light was better there. The curtains pulled just enough to keep the glare off her face. White lilies were set in her hands, and more were tucked along the sofa, so she looked occupied, as if resting between visits. The photographer asked everyone to stay still. Cousin Ruth sat behind her, patient and pale, hands folded, watching the clock tick through the silence. Later, when the print came back, Ruth said she didn't remember being in the room at all. She had gone home early, she insisted, before the snow began. But there she was, slightly blurred, leaning forward with a look that was not grief exactly, but expectancy. Eleanor had once sworn her mother would come for her when the time was right. The lilies, if you look closely, seemed pressed where a second body had settled. The woman on the landing, Savannah, Georgia. Late afternoon, 1907. The housekeeper had just finished polishing the banister, pleased with the quiet shine it held in the afternoon light. Dust floated gently near the tall window, and the grandfather clock marked time in a steady, patient voice. When the photograph was taken, the landing was meant to be empty, only the stair and its careful symmetry. Later, Mrs. Caldwell noticed a woman standing where no one should have been, her outline thin as breath on glass. The figure seemed dressed for mourning, her face indistinct, as if the light refused to finish her. Mrs. Caldwell said she felt no fear, only a strange pressure, like waiting for someone who never arrives. The clock in the hall had once belonged to her mother, who died there, halfway down those same stairs. In the photograph, the woman appears to be listening, as though the clock had finally called her back. The room that remembered him. New Orleans, Louisiana. Autumn evening, 1893. The parlor was kept exactly as Edwin Merrow preferred it, crowded with gilt frames, heavy drapes, and the chandelier trimmed but never cleaned too well. His sister said dust made the room feel lived in. When the photograph was taken, Edwin sat straight-backed beneath the chandelier, recently returned from college, his expression patient and faintly amused. Later, when the plate was developed, they noticed something unsettled in the arrangement. Several portraits behind him appeared brighter than they should have been, as if someone had leaned close to the glass. One frame, which once held only a landscape, now showed a pale child standing beside an unseen woman's skirts. Edwin insisted he had no memory of that picture. Their mother quietly disagreed. She said the room had always remembered who belonged there, even those who had been buried before the walls were finished. The empty chair. Cedar Falls, Iowa. Late summer, 1976. The picture was taken on a warm afternoon when the house still smelled of dust and lemon oil. Linda had moved the chair closer because the light fell better there, softening the wallpaper's faded flowers. She sat on the floor without thinking much about it, one arm draped casually, as if someone else had just stood up. When the photo came back, she laughed at how serious she looked, older somehow than her 19 years. It was her mother who noticed the space beside her, the chair angled inward, the cushions slightly pressed. Linda said no one had been sitting there. She remembered the room clearly, the radio humming, the door shut. Years later, after Linda was gone, the house stayed the same. The chair was never moved again. Visitors said it always felt rude to sit there, as though someone was already waiting. The second gift. Bremen, Germany, Christmas Eve, 1912. The photograph was meant to be simple, taken to send to relatives before the year ended. Marta sat stiffly beside the Christmas tree, one hand resting near the candle, the other close to the small table where her daughter's doll had been carefully arranged. The room smelled of wax and pine, and Marta remembered worrying the child would knock the ornaments loose. When the plate was developed, she noticed the chair beside her looked occupied, though no one had been there. A faint shape leaned inward, its outline soft, its face unfinished, like breath caught in cold air. Marta said nothing. Her first child, Elise, had died the winter before, buried with the same doll's twin clasped to her chest. That night, Marta lit an extra candle beneath the tree. In the photograph, the flame bends sideways, as if someone unseen had leaned close to receive it. The shade at the roots. Asheville, North Carolina, summer afternoon, 1924. They said it was only a playful photograph, taken after lunch while everyone lingered in the yard, reluctant to go back inside. Clara laughed when someone suggested she stand between the two trees, balancing herself the way she used to as a girl. The houses behind her look ordinary enough. Their porches empty, their windows open to the heat. Nothing feels staged. When the picture was developed, the laughter faded. Beneath the split trunk, at the base where the roots twist and rise, there is a darker shape pressed close to the earth. It looks small, crouched, as though hiding from the light. Clara swore no one had been there. Later, she remembered a boy who once played in that yard, quiet and fond of shadows, gone before autumn came. What unsettles those who study the photograph is not Clara standing above, but the sense that someone below is holding very still, waiting to be noticed again. The second recruit, Lyon, France, spring, 1916. The card was issued without ceremony, stamped and signed in a narrow office that smelled of ink and damp wool. Henri Lemaitre sat straight for the photograph, cap removed, uniform newly pressed, his expression calm in the way men learned quickly that year. Nothing about the image seemed unusual at first. It was only later, when his sister studied the card by lamplight, that she noticed the blur behind his left shoulder. A second figure appeared there, faint and unfinished, its face pale, its posture uncertain, as if unsure it belonged in the frame. Henri said the room had been empty. He remembered the photographer clearly, the instructions to keep still, the silence afterward. Yet the shape remains, close enough to touch him. Their mother said it looked like Henri's older brother, lost in training months before, never officially recorded. The unsettling detail is not the figure itself, but how slightly Henri seems to lean toward it, as though already responding to a familiar presence, the one who wouldn't stay behind. Dorset Coast, England, 1868. The photograph was taken on a mild afternoon, when the wind off the sea barely stirred the grass. Eleanor Marsh sat patiently, hands folded in her lap, her dress freshly brushed for the occasion. She remembered the photographer urging her not to smile too much, saying the light was unforgiving. Behind her, the shoreline blurred into pale sky, ordinary and harmless. When the image was developed, the family admired Eleanor's calm expression, before noticing the figure standing several steps back. A woman, thin as mist, her face softened beyond recognition, watching Eleanor with a familiarity that felt intimate rather than threatening. Eleanor insisted no one had been walking there, yet her mother went quiet, recalling Eleanor's younger sister, Margaret, who drowned years earlier in the same shallow water, just out of sight of the house. What unsettled them most was not the figure's presence, but Eleanor's posture, slightly turned, as if she had sensed someone waiting patiently behind her all along. The sleeper no one reserved. Somewhere between Chicago and New York, 1901, the photograph was meant to advertise comfort. Polished wood panels, heavy curtains, and a wide bed dressed carefully for a passenger who had not yet arrived. The Pullman Palace car was still, paused in a quiet yard, its lamps lit to show how well a man might sleep while the country moved beneath him. When the image was developed, the company clerk admired the symmetry before noticing the pale blur near the bedside. It looked almost courteous, standing just far enough away to wait its turn. No record showed anyone assigned to that berth. An older porter studied the picture longer than the others. He said some travelers never finished their journeys, especially in cars this fine. What unsettled him was the mattress, pressed faintly on one side, as if someone had already tested its softness, then risen politely when the camera was raised. The space behind the chair. Des Moines, Iowa. Autumn evening, 1978. The photograph was taken after dinner, when the lamp cast a soft yellow circle and the room felt settled for the night. Karen leaned over the back of the sofa, smiling, her arms loose around her younger brother as if the moment might last. Nothing seemed staged. The desk was cluttered, the carpet worn thin where everyone walked. When the picture was developed, they laughed at first, pleased with how ordinary it looked. It was Karen who noticed the darkened space behind the chair at the edge of the frame, where the light should have fallen cleanly. A shape seemed to linger there, taller than a shadow, not quite touching the floor. Their mother said it was only the lamp playing tricks. Yet she moved the chair the next morning. The space behind it felt crowded, she said, as though someone had stood there a long time, waiting for the room to notice it had never truly been empty. The third place by the tree. Dayton, Ohio. Christmas morning, 1974. The photograph was taken quickly, before the coffee cooled, before anyone sat down. Harold stood to the left of the tree, Ruth to the right, both dressed properly, both a little stiff from waiting. The ornaments were old ones, thin glass, kept year after year in the same tissue paper. When the picture came back, Harold said it looked exactly as he remembered it. Ruth did not answer. She kept staring at the space between them. Low beside the tree, where the tinsel seemed heavier, slightly pulled, there was a faint shape there. The suggestion of a shoulder, a bowed head, as if someone had knelt to straighten a gift. Their son had always done that when he was small, careful and quiet. Before the winter, he never came home. Ruth said nothing and set the photo in a frame. Every Christmas after, the presents shifted there on their own, just a little, as though someone else had been helping. The plate that would not clear. Albany, New York, 1854. The boy was dressed carefully for the photograph, collar stiff against his throat, boots polished until they caught the light. His mother had wiped his hands twice and told him not to fidget, reminding him this would last longer than he would remember. The exposure took longer than expected. He sat very still, eyes fixed on something just beyond the camera, as if listening. When the plate was later cleaned, the damage was blamed on age. Chemical bloom, careless storage, nothing more. But the marks seemed to gather around his face, thinning his features, hollowing his chest, leaving his hands untouched. His father said the boy had been sickly that winter, fading in small ways no one wanted to name. The unsettling thing is not how the image decays, but how little of him was ever fully there. The chair beneath him looks solid. The boy does not. The line that didn't move. Akron, Ohio, Saturday afternoon, 1972. The store was crowded in the ordinary way. Carts bumping heels, the air smelling of oranges and warm bread. June leaned over the register, tapping the keys harder than necessary while the receipt paper rattled. The man in the straw hat waited patiently, hands folded, eyes on the counter as if he'd been there before. When the photograph was developed, it looked like any weekend errand, except for the space behind the scale. There was a blur there, narrow and upright. Not quite a person, not quite a shadow, standing where no one could stand without being noticed. June said no one had been behind her. She remembered the line clearly because it wouldn't move. The manager remembered differently. He said a clerk had died years earlier, collapsing between the lanes, and the store never quite learned how to close that gap. In the picture, the tape feeds on, printing totals for a customer who never steps forward. The face beneath the curtain. Providence, Rhode Island. Late night, 2019. The photo was taken casually, without thinking. Just another moment caught on a phone before everyone went to sleep. The room was dim but familiar. The worn couch, the patterned wallpaper, a phone left face down on the cushion like it always was. Emily leaned in to kiss her friend, laughing softly, half aware of the camera, half ready to pull away. Nothing felt unusual at the time. It was only days later, scrolling back through the images, that she noticed the lower edge of the curtain behind them. Beneath its hem, where the light should have fallen cleanly, a pale face seemed to surface. Eyes open, expression intent, as if watching the closeness with quiet patience. Emily said the curtain hadn't moved all night. The window was closed. What unsettled her most was the angle of the face. It wasn't looking at the girls. It was looking at the phone, as though it knew exactly where it would appear. The Man Who Didn't Blink, New Orleans, Louisiana, 1851. The portrait was made to mark a small success, nothing more than a keepsake framed in gilt and set on the mantel. Thomas Bell sat through the long exposure without complaint, shoulders squared, eyes fixed ahead as instructed. The photographer praised his stillness. When the plate was finished, no one noticed anything wrong. Years later, after the glass had clouded and the edges darkened, the face began to trouble those who looked too long. One eye seemed sharper than the other, more awake, as if it had adjusted to the dark behind the camera. Thomas's daughter said her father learned to hold his breath that year, wading through fevers that came and went. The unsettling detail is not the stare itself, but how the surrounding image decays while his gaze remains intact. The frame grows dull, the surface corrodes. The man appears to be watching from a place the photograph never learned how to forget. The Face in the Net, Karelia, Russia. Late afternoon, 1931. The photograph shows a woman resting on the steps, taking a short break from her work. The air was cool, and the logs behind her still held the day's warmth. She held the fishing net loosely, fingers numb from the repetitive motion, thinking only of finishing before dusk. Nothing about the moment seemed worth remembering. When the image was printed, attention stayed on the net. Woven among the strands, a face appeared. Small, pressed forward, its features blurred but unmistakably human. The woman said the net had been empty, newly washed, shaken clean before she sat down. Her mother grew quiet when she saw it. Years earlier, a child from the village had drowned after becoming tangled in river nets, left too long in the water. What unsettles viewers is not the face itself, but its expression. It does not look trapped. It looks patient, as though the net had finally learned how to hold what it had once refused to release. The One Still Inside. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Late autumn, 1910. The photograph was taken to document the damage after the hillside gave way. Boards sliding downhill in the night with a sound like slow thunder. The house remained standing, though its porch sagged and the crates below lay cracked and useless. In the image, everything looked settled, as if the earth had finished its work. It was a clerk from the company who noticed the face among the broken planks, pale and pressed between boards that should have been empty. At first, it seemed like a knot in the wood, an accident of grain and shadow. But the longer one looked, the more deliberate it felt. The eyes open, the mouth slightly parted, as if caught mid-thought. The owner of the building said no one was missing. He said everyone had gotten out. Yet the crates had once held tools, lunches, coats left behind. The unsettling thing is not the face itself, but how the wood appears to lean inward, carefully, as though making room for someone who never finished leaving. The Dog Who Waited. Cedar Rapids, Iowa, Christmas morning, 1979. They took the photograph before breakfast, while the tree lights were still warm and the house smelled faintly of pine and coffee. Buddy had been told to sit on the rug, and he did, ears uneven, eyes steady, patient in the way dogs learn to be. The presents behind him were already opened, their paper folded back neatly, as if someone had taken care not to tear it. When the photo was developed weeks later, nothing seemed wrong at first. Buddy was centered, the tree slightly crooked, the room familiar. Then someone noticed the haze behind him, low and pale, pooling near the gifts. It wasn't smoke. The fireplace had been cold. Buddy had died that spring, quietly, in the night, after waiting by the door too long. What unsettled them was not the blur itself, but Buddy's expression. He looks less like he's posing, and more like he's keeping watch, exactly where he was told to stay. The One Who Rose, near Ypres, Belgium, dawn, 1917. The photograph was taken quietly, meant to record the line before orders changed again. The men lay where they had dropped, uniforms dark with damp earth, hands still curled around small habits of survival. The trees stood thin and indifferent, their trunks pale in the morning haze. At first glance, nothing moves. Then the eye catches the lighter shape rising from the grass between them, narrow and upright, as if someone had pushed himself to his knees. The soldiers who later saw the print said no one had stood there when the shutter clicked. They remembered counting heads, making sure none were left breathing. One man, Private Collins, said it looked like his friend Arthur, who used to get up early, unable to sleep once the guns fell quiet. The figure has no face, only intention. What lingers is not that someone stands among the fallen, but that he appears to be waiting for the rest to follow. Before you leave, take one last look at these photographs. Ask yourself what they truly captured, and what might still be lingering just outside the frame. If you notice something unsettling, something you can't quite explain, share it in the comments. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next image that refuses to stay silent.